Colombia bursts with life: snow-capped Andes, endless Amazon jungle, palm-lined Caribbean beaches, and cities pulsing with music and color. Yet behind the scenery lies a deeper story, a country built by many peoples, cultures and histories. In this script we explore the main ethnic and cultural groups of Colombia, how they came to be, why people continue to move here, and what it costs to make a home in this country today. It's a journey through mestizo and white Colombians, indigenous nations, Afro-Colombian communities, and smaller groups like the Raizal and Romani. Along the way we uncover migration patterns, reasons for relocation, and average housing costs. By the end you'll understand not just Colombia's beauty but the human fabric that shapes it. Mestizos and white Colombians. The largest segment of Colombia's population is made up of mestizos and white Colombians. Mestizo generally refers to people of mixed European and indigenous ancestry, though in Colombia it is a broad category including anyone not identifying with an ethnic minority. White Colombians are those with primarily European heritage, historically descended from Spanish settlers but also including waves of Basques, Italians, Germans and others. Spanish colonists began arriving in the early 1500s, establishing cities, missions and administrative centers. Over centuries of intermarriage and social mixing, a mestizo majority emerged, while elites of mostly European descent dominated politics and commerce. Today, about 87% of Colombians do not identify with an ethnic minority, a figure encompassing both mestizo and white Colombians. Genetic studies show the average Colombian has a blend of indigenous, European and African ancestry, though proportions vary greatly by region. In the Andean highlands and major cities, European ancestry tends to be higher, while in rural or peripheral areas indigenous or African roots are more prominent. This mixing is visible in language, religion, music, cuisine and customs. It also underlies social hierarchies that historically favored whiter appearances and European culture. Even as modern Colombia promotes diversity, these inequalities linger in access to education, jobs and political power. Migration continues to reshape this group. Many mestizos move internally from rural areas to cities for work and education. Foreign immigration has added new layers: Spanish entrepreneurs, North American retirees, and Europeans investing in real estate have all settled in Colombia's urban centers, blending into the mestizo white mainstream while also changing it. This ongoing flow reinforces Colombia's identity as a mixed heritage nation. Indigenous peoples long before European ships arrived, present-day Colombia was home to hundreds of indigenous nations. The Muisca in the Andean highlands built complex societies with advanced agriculture, goldworking and governance. Their ritual offerings to Lake Guatavita inspired the legend of El Dorado. Along the Caribbean coast the Tairona thrived. Their descendants, including the Kogi, Arhuaco and Wiwa, still inhabit the Sierra Nevada de Santa Marta. In the Amazon and Pacific regions dozens of other groups maintained distinct languages and cosmologies. Spanish conquest brought devastating disease, forced labor and displacement, shrinking indigenous populations and eroding traditional ways of life. Yet many communities endured and today more than 80 distinct indigenous groups are officially recognized. Some, like the Weu in La Guajira or the Nasa, Paez, in Cauca, number in the hundreds of thousands. Others consist of small communities deep in the Amazon. Indigenous organizations such as the National Indigenous Organization of Colombia campaign for land rights, cultural preservation and self-governance. Legal reforms have granted many communities greater autonomy, allowing them to administer local budgets and maintain traditional authorities. Migration patterns are complex. Some indigenous people remain in ancestral territories, bound by spiritual ties to the land, while others migrate to cities seeking education, healthcare and work. Urban life offers opportunity but also assimilation pressures and discrimination. In both rural and urban contexts, indigenous Colombians continue to fight for recognition, territory and survival of their languages and traditions. Afro-Colombians. Another foundational population is Afro-Colombians, descendants of Africans enslaved during the colonial period and of free black communities that arose over time. Enslaved Africans were brought to Colombia to work in gold mines, sugar and cocoa plantations, and domestic service, particularly along the Caribbean and Pacific coasts. Some escaped and formed autonomous settlements called palenques, preserving African cultural practices far from colonial centers. Afro-Colombian culture has profoundly shaped national identity. Drumming traditions, marimba rhythms, cumbia, curulao and champeta music trace African roots. Coastal cuisines fuse African, indigenous and Spanish influences. Despite this richness, Afro-Colombian regions have often been marginalized, with limited infrastructure, public services and economic opportunity. In the 2018 census, about 6 to 7% of Colombians identified as Afro-Colombian, Raizal or Palenquero. The real percentage is likely higher due to mixed ancestry and underreporting. Today Afro-Colombians are visible in politics, arts and sports, yet still face higher poverty rates and discrimination. Migration plays a big role. Many leave coastal areas for cities seeking education and jobs, while some return to develop tourism or cultural enterprises in their home regions. Colombia's constitutional recognition of Afro-descendant communities has bolstered collective land rights and representation, but implementation remains uneven. Smaller groups. Raizal, Romani and others. Colombia also contains smaller ethnic groups that enrich its cultural mosaic. The Raizal people of San Andrés, Providencia and Santa Catalina Islands descend from Afro-Caribbean settlers and speak an English-based Creole alongside Spanish. Protestantism is common among them, contrasting with the mainland's Catholic majority. Demographic shifts from migration and tourism have reduced the Raizal share of the archipelago's population, raising debates about autonomy and cultural preservation. A very small Romani, Gypsy, community lives in Colombia as part of the global Roma diaspora. Their ancestors arrived via Europe centuries ago and many have integrated while maintaining some traditional crafts and customs. In addition to these, dozens of indigenous groups not widely known, from the Amazon to the Pacific, maintain their own languages and rituals. Each adds unique threads to Colombia's cultural fabric and faces its own challenges of land, identity and survival. Why people move to Colombia? Colombia is not only shaped by its historical peoples but also by constant movement. Internal migration has been one of the country's most powerful forces. Rural families displaced by conflict, lack of services or limited opportunities move to cities like Bogotá, Medellín, Cali and Barranquilla. This has transformed urban demographics, swelling informal neighborhoods and creating vibrant mixes of regional cultures. Internationally, Colombia has become attractive to foreigners for several reasons. Its cost of living is lower than in many Western countries. Natural beauty, biodiversity and a variety of climates, from cool mountain towns to tropical beaches, appeal to retirees, digital nomads and entrepreneurs. Growing tourism and investment sectors create opportunities in hospitality, real estate and services. Some foreigners come for relationships or to learn Spanish immersed in a rich culture. Colombia has also received large numbers of migrants from neighboring Venezuela due to that country's economic and political crisis. This influx has reshaped border regions and urban labor markets. At the same time, Colombians themselves emigrate abroad for work or study, creating transnational networks that later facilitate return migration and investment. All these movements continue the blending of cultures that defines Colombia. Housing and real estate. For anyone thinking of moving to Colombia, housing is a key consideration. National averages in late 2025 show apartments selling for about 3.45 million Colombian pesos per square meter and houses for about 3.18 million pesos per square meter. In dollar terms, this can range roughly from 800 to 2,000 United States dollars per square meter depending on location and exchange rates. Bogota's prime neighborhoods average over 7 million pesos per square meter for apartments, Medellin's El Poblado about 6 million, while secondary cities like Cali or Barranquilla are lower but vary widely by district and amenities. Coastal and tourist zones command premiums, especially for beachfront properties. House prices have risen dramatically over the past 2 decades, up several hundred% nominally. In 2024, existing house prices increased by more than 12% and by 2025 are still rising at about 10% year-over-year nationwide. Currency depreciation makes property relatively affordable to foreigners with stronger currencies and creates potential for investment returns, but also means local buyers face challenges keeping up. A 100 square meters apartment in a mid to high range area of Bogotá could cost around 713 million pesos, about 178,000 United States dollars at 4,000 COP, USD. In a more modest city or neighborhood, the same size apartment might be 350 million pesos, 8,750 USD. Houses vary even more with lot size, location and infrastructure. Buyers must do careful legal checks on titles, taxes and municipal approvals. Foreigners can buy property without major restrictions but should budget extra for notary fees, taxes and legal costs of 1 to 3% or more. Real estate can be a path to residency for some investors but requires due diligence. Pulling it all together, Colombia's story is one of diversity, mixing and movement. Mestizos and whites form the mainstream shaped by centuries of European and indigenous interaction. Indigenous peoples maintain ancient ties to the land while adapting to modern pressures. Afro-Colombians bring deep cultural currents from Africa's diaspora. Smaller groups like the Raizal and Romani add further texture. Each faces its own opportunities and inequalities. Migration within and into Colombia continues to redraw boundaries. People move from countryside to city, from one region to another, from abroad into Colombia, drawn by affordability, opportunity and culture. These flows feed the nation's dynamism but also test its capacity for inclusion. Housing trends mirror these movements: booming urban property markets, rising coastal demand, and stark contrasts between rich and poor areas. Understanding this human landscape is key for anyone considering travel, investment or relocation. It reveals a Colombia that is not just a postcard of mountains and beaches but a living mosaic of peoples, histories and aspirations. Colombia is more than a destination. It is a confluence of civilizations, an ever-evolving blend of indigenous resilience, African rhythms, European legacies and global migrations. Every street in Bogotá, every beach in San Andrés, every village in the Amazon carries stories layered over centuries. Whether you are planning a visit, thinking of moving or simply curious, appreciating this diversity is essential. Respecting the people who built and sustained Colombia enriches your experience far beyond sightseeing. If you found this exploration valuable, consider subscribing for more deep dives into Latin American cultures and practical tips for living abroad. The journey doesn't end here. It begins when you step onto Colombian soil and feel its many histories beneath your feet.